He's gotten so many honors from Ole Miss and SEC and all that. You'd never know he could make a goal. He does not talk about himself. And but God blessed him, and his daddy had seen him as a little boy shoot the goal here. He put him up a goal out right down here. And he says, one day he said, he's going to play basketball. I said, oh, don't say what our kids are going to do, because sometimes they don't do that. He said, Penny, nothing happens to him physically. He'll play basketball. And he says, I'm going to give him every opportunity I can. He died in his 12. I said, well, I'll try to do what he planned to do. I'll try to help develop that talent that God has given him. I'll give him all opportunities. So sometimes he and I kind of crossed when I'd say we're going to a basketball camp at Ole Miss. I don't want to go, Mother, because he is a stay-home boy. So he went to Northeast. He went to Blue Mountain. In fact, he directed a camp at Blue Mountain after he got out back home. So I would leave him unhappy sometimes at Ole Miss. But his name got out there, and the coaches that came, they saw him playing, and so I said, well, you've got the talent your dad said you had, and everybody else says you had, so we're going to develop it. So I made many trips, then I'd end to Nashville and teach school all day and be back the next day. And the only place I didn't go when he was playing was Florida, because they played Wednesday nights then. And it wasn't convenient for me to go. But I followed him to New Orleans and Dallas and all around. I had nothing else to do. And Diane and Hugh were very good. Hugh was my chauffeur. He was excited about going too. So my sister told me once, after I'd been a widow a while, a long time, she said, you need some social life. I said, no. Not until John gets through college. We'll think about something then. So we made many miles, didn't we, Diane?
We made many miles. Daddy said
Birmingham and back. And Johnny was here when John was learning to dribble and all, and he showed him several things like how you shoot. And he just had an eye for it. So I said, God bless you, and we're going to follow what he's leading. And it's quite a story about his recruiting one at Diane. I went through a miserable 2 or 3 years with the recruiting. All the big colleges wanted him. And I played some of them, Nashville and Alabama, and of course Jackson many times. I bet he's played in Jackson Coliseum as much as anybody had. But those recruiters will tell you anything. They'd come out here, the president of the college and what all trying to sway us to their college. But Mississippi State and Ole Miss and Vanderbilt were really, really after him. Some people said, he'll go where you want him to go. I said, no, it's his decision. I'll take him to these places to see them and meet the people. But no, he's to decide. So anyway, we did a lot of praying about it, and they were hammering me to death. And him too, he got where he wouldn't stay in the house, the phone ringing all the time. And so one night he had gone with Diane and Hugh someplace, and I was here, and I had prayed about it so hard, and I said, Lord, you got to help me out. And he did. I said, if I could just talk to a college coach, some particular one, I won't say, if he were to call us, Lord, I'm going to go with faith, if that's where you want him. Well, I was here by myself one night, and that coach called me. So when they came in, I said, John, I think we know where we're going. with all of our praying, God's answered. So, and he was he was relieved. He was so, like a different child for a few days to get that stress off of him. And it was hard. Coach Weltlich was hard. And but he saw John's talent, and he developed him. It was a nightmare for us all because he was so tough.
Wouldn't feed him after a game.
I couldn't speak to him.
Oh,
And he wouldn't let John speak to me. I'd go to, I know one particular night we went to Alabama, and this had happened before. So, of course, we were waiting after the game to see him. And one of the younger players came by the car, and he says, "Miss Stroud, John can't see you tonight. Coach won't let him." That was just one time.
and then the time that the guys from home were down at Baton Rouge watching him play, and of course they didn't know. And
They weren't
went
down
waited
there.
outside by the bus to see him and talked to John, and maybe gave him a bag of goodies and all. And I think Weltlich took the goodie bag, and John didn't get to eat that night. Rode back on the bus all the way home. Those are just some of the stories we knew we have heard since.
John came in the next morning and was fixing breakfast. He had been at Baton Rouge, drove straight through with the team, and then out here, and he was so down. He says, "Mother, the coach said he's going to leave me down there because I didn't play well." But he made John, and we stuck it out. When the conference was Weltlich, I told him, "Well, I appreciate your ability. I know you're really doing John well. We just don't like your tongue." He says, "Yeah, I guess I do." I said, "You do."
On the John Stroud Day in New Albany, as Weltlich did his presentation and was on stage and called John up, and the last thing he said to him as he shook his hand and hugged him, said, "If or when I have a little boy, I hope he'll be just like John Stroud."
So it was worth all
and then
the...
they have been friends all these years. But you have to remember, this was Weltlich's first major coaching
See, he was,
position
what's his name?
at Indiana.
Indiana.
under
He was
Knight.
assistant there, and he left there and came to Ole Miss. So, boy, they were kind to me and all this, and they were the
Mother
only
was a-
ones that...
She was a great mother for a single boy, and to be at home, and she did provide all the good things for John in his life. And she would say to him, "We will not be a quitter. You will persevere and keep on and overcome." And as y'all know, he did. But it was hard, a young man that had been in a female world, to be thrust in that.
So I'm proud of him. I'm proud of him.
Everybody is.
Well, he's a good boy. I know when his daddy died that afternoon in the hospital, suddenly, with me the only one there, nobody knew he was having a heart attack. Anyway, one of the first thoughts that came to my mind, "Oh Lord, I've got a boy. What if he's rebellious? You're going to have to take over." And we did, didn't we, Diane? We depended on the Lord for everything, because He'll do it. We just don't, we miss so many blessings because we don't let Him run our life. So He's really blessed me. Losing his daddy was so sudden. It was a hard valley. But we grew to the mountaintop. And he never bragged about himself or anything. And I was proud of that for him, that he wasn't conceited or wanted to be out there.
And actually, Mother, that's where his personality was different from Daddy's. As you see about the Whiskered Wizards and some of those things, Daddy had a more showmanship play, the way he played, his style, and also his personality.
Yeah, he never met a stranger, and they never forgot him if they met him.
And he had a charisma about him. Now, not that John doesn't, because John is tall and handsome and all, but Daddy, as a young man, was a very handsome man too. And on the court, he was, they said, really was amazing, even as a high school player.
Okay, he grew up in Enterprise. And the house, not he was born then, because they built a new house, but it was right across from the Baptist church, right there in Enterprise. He was pride and joy of his family. He was the youngest till Charles C. Gooseby came along, but he was Mama Stroud's favorite son, you know, and so he played on the dirt court, and then he started going to Macedonia, and he played there the 4 years. War came along, messed up his college career because he was drafted, and then when the war was over, we had a family then, so he just went to work and played for the Whiskered Wizards, and he has a franchise, because the man who had started the team was a pro fella and had had it for a number of years. So he gave it to Johnny, because he wanted out of basketball. He was in Florida. So we took over the Whiskered Wizards. I had an old typewriter and no printer, of course, and Johnny had visited all these places in the South and even as far as California, playing with the Whiskered Wizards. And so I would type letters to all these places that he had been before to make a date for the next year. So that was my summer job, and so we had the schedule because he was in charge of the Whiskered Wizards. And that's how we got started, because we didn't have any money. So somebody said, "How do you let him go?" And I said, "Well, you don't know everything." But we were able to buy the farm, build a house. Diane was just a little bitty girl, and we came home, well, at the end of the season, and she was, how old? 2 or 3, and he shaved his beard off. Oh, she wouldn't have a thing to do with him. She didn't know that man. And she was his pride and joy. And I know after we had her, and I got pregnant with John, I wanted more than one child. Johnny says, "I can't love another child." I said, "Well, I can, and I need another child." So John came along at my wishes. And I'm so sorry his daddy didn't get to see any of his work. Maybe he was watching over us, but anyway, we kind of got on our feet financially, and sometimes you have to go through hard times to get up here. You know, it's not just handed to you. You work for it. Of course,
I don't know if you knew, but Mother and Daddy were high school sweethearts.
10th grade on. And we went our different ways sometimes, but we both knew that we would marry someday. We had a good life together. Johnny was a good man. Basketball was in our family. And I started playing a little bit in junior high because it hadn't really got established then. But in the way, the 10th grade, I started going out for high school. And I played those 3 years, got All-State 2 or 3 times too, and North Half, because we had a good team back then.
You were at Macedonia?
Uh-huh. I finished there.
Now, Mother, you said 2 or 3 years. You made All-State all 3 years. 10th, 11th, 12th, and you only played the 3 years. So some of the talent that John got was not just from Daddy's side. In fact, we always thought he got his height from Mother's side, and he looks like her older brother, George.
Diane also made All-State, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
And she went to school where?
She finished at West Union and went to Northeast 2 years and then went to Ole Miss. After her daddy died, she said, I'll stay home with you and commute. So there were several from New Albany commuting. So she finished and got her master's at Ole Miss. I'm proud of my children. Both of them have their master's degree. But I taught for 30 years. And trying to
What did
get,
you teach?
I taught in elementary. And after Johnny died, I went to see a counselor because that was such a shock. Well, I like to do that, you know. So I went back to college and got certified in counseling, and came back to West Union and was their school counselor, so to speak, having the kids decide on where to go to college and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it was the Southern League that he played in first, before he went to the Whiskered Wizards.
And
Nobody had beards then, so to see good-looking men with beards, they drew attention. And he did, maybe at halftime, a little show for him because he was such a good shot. And
when later in life, Daddy worked for William Winter as he was running for governor. And Daddy was his
chauffeur. He traveled all over
drove
the
him
state.
all over the state. And when they went to Laurel through their politicking, Governor Winter came to our house and spent the night several occasions.
Yeah.
Mother cooked for him, and he shared with Mother, said, well, Johnny ought to be running in some of the places that we go through. Everybody knows him.
Yeah.
And of course, that was one of the reasons Daddy was hired to do that. And that was a great time in his life. And it wasn't long before he
Right.
did have his heart attack.
Your brother, James, talk about his basketball career.
Well, excuse me, he finished at Macedonia and was an outstanding player there, and also Willie Gillum that went out,
They were the same age, the
Uh-huh.
Gillums
and James Wesley, And they went to Holmes Junior College on a scholarship. Well, from there, Alabama recruited James Wesley, my brother, with a scholarship. So he left Holmes. The next 2 years went to Alabama. He was an outstanding player too. That's
Baseball,
Camille. You remember? You know Camille Andy.
Yes.
That's her daddy.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I was a cheerleader in high school, and so excited because Daddy did not encourage me to play basketball. Now here I was, leaning tall, but there was not a future for girls basketball. So
No.
he said then. There wasn't after high school for girls. And so the coach, we got a new coach my senior year, and actually came my junior year.
Yeah.
And he finds out who my daddy is. And so when school started that year, he began to say, I need you to go out for basketball. I need you. And I was like, I don't want to play basketball. I'm a cheerleader.
He says,
Well-
you can't be a cheerleader. He came to me and said, you mean she's a cheerleader? She ought to be playing basketball.
She was Johnny Stroud's daughter. That was the thing. So after I don't concede to do that, he comes and visits Mother and Daddy.
He recruits you.
He recruits me.
Yeah.
He comes up and Daddy would say, I wouldn't fool with that. Go on and do what you want to do. There's, it's a lot of hard work and don't worry about it. Well, the man continued, and when basketball really got started out at West Union, he tells me to come on out and play. I can still get to be the cheerleader. So I go out and play, and I attribute some of my success that year. I did not play. The morning we drove to Kosciuszko, Daddy told me, now you're not going to be guarding out front. You're going to be guarding at the back. Well, I didn't like that. And he says, but you've got to win this game, and you're going to be doing this. Well, what's the coach going to say? And Daddy just said, just be ready. That's what you're going to do. And the only time in my year that I looked at Daddy was the first half. I got 3 fouls because I wasn't used to playing back there. And I looked over to him, and he gives me hand signals or whatever we did. And I didn't foul out. And of course, this, the story goes, I made All-State. And my daddy was ragged that the coach came up from the Delta and took a cheerleader and made an All-State player out of her in 1 year.
Yeah.
But we know now that, Daddy did silently probably contribute to my
But not
success
much.
that year.
Not much.
No, he
Yeah, the
didn't.
coach
Like
did.
that's what I was saying, that he stayed out of it to let me do whatever I wanted to do. But it was great, and I'm glad to be a little bit of the tradition. Should have been playing every year. Not that I would have been an All-State for 4 years like my daddy or my mama, but I should have played. And back to John would have been an All-State 4 years, but they didn't go his freshman year. They had another coach, and they were good, but they did not make the
State tournament.
play to go to state to play, because we were kind of sad about that. Of course, the next year they went his 10th, 11th, and 12th, and didn't make it.
Do you remember what your basketball uniform looked like?
Oh, they were homemade.
Can you describe those?
Pardon?
You made your own?
They hired a lady in the community to, and said we didn't have the money in the school to buy it.
What were they made of? What fabric? were they made
Kind of satiny like,
And what were your
really.
school colors?
Black and white. We had
What
black.
were they the Falcons or the Urchins or what?
No,
Macedonia.
they didn't put names with them until after West Union.
Okay.
We were just, everybody knew
Just
Macedonia.
Basketball giants is what they were.
None of the schools had logos.
Okay.
We were on our way to Pontotoc to state tournament, and we stopped in New Albany on a Friday because Mrs. What's her name was there to make pictures, and that's in one of the little valleys, and that's not the word for it, the little streets, between the buildings.
Yeah.
And we dressed, and she met us there and made that picture, and we undressed and went on to Pontotoc. And we stayed in homes. We didn't come back and forth because gas was rationed. So people in the community would house like 2 of us because it's too far from Pontotoc to come back home. Go back because you didn't have the gas.
So did you play? Did you win?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we won state and played in Pontotoc.
Who was your coach?
The principal of the school, B.H. Coombs.
Did your parents play basketball?
No, my dad was a rural mail carrier at Etta. At one time, he was postmaster there. When Etta was established,
So your mother's name was
her name was, they called her Pug, but it was Iona Gray.
okay.
She's Papa had told me, said when they were just going to establish the Etta post office there and in the community, people from Washington came down. So okay, and all this. Well, what are we going to name it? This community. And one of the guys that came with him said, "Oh, well, my wife's named Etta. We'll name it Etta." And so that's how Etta got its name. So my dad was in the Postal Service for 30 years. And we had a big farm out at Etta. There where the post office is, as you cross from there on down the Lafayette County line. My dad had 700 acres back there. No, my daddy was sure that he wanted us children educated. And back when I was little going to school, they didn't have free textbooks. But I remember when the state took over and bought the textbooks. But I can remember my daddy coming in off the route, getting the name of all the books we needed, and go to the drugstores in town and buy our books. And of course, after a while, we could kind of hand them down, but I was the youngest. But we'd swap. And some of the kids, they couldn't afford the books. So then the state adopted, we'll buy all the books for the schools. So that happened in my lifetime too, where the state bought the books.
When you went to college, there wasn't women's basketball, was there?
No, not in college. I went to the W. I started off going to the W. My sister had graduated there. And they had a team, in the PE courses.
Did you play?
Yeah, like 9 weeks.
Play for a course.
Yeah, we had to have PE, so.
Diane, did you play? You played at Northeast, right?
No,
No. Okay.
that was what I was saying about Daddy. Said there was no future, meaning there was not girls basketball in college then. It stopped in high school.
Seems like it was 1976, Title 20, that gave women the right to play.
I thought I was going to say about the time John went to Ole Miss in '76, so I think that's about the time. I was going to say nearly 10 years later after I graduated.
There were some outstanding girl players in the county, but they didn't have college teams then for them to go on.
From a Macedonia perspective, who were your big rivals that you always?
Pinedale.
Okay.
Center, Myrtle one.
And did everybody have a gym?
No. Well, later years they did. Macedonia was the first county school that got a gym, and the community built it. In fact, James Wesley, my brother, was one of the players there, and the families went out and got the materials, and they built the Macedonia gym. And my brother, James Wesley, helped saw the logs and whatever this. It was a community thing.